Yo guys, and welcome back to another video on this channel. Hope you guys are doing fantastic as usual. And today we're gonna be looking a bit at accessibility. This is something I've been putting off for a while because quite frankly I don't know it well enough. But we're here to learn together, that's what it's all about. So we're gonna take a look at making our app a bit more accessible. And of course you can also go into oblivion with this, which we are not really going to be doing. We're just going to be touching the surface level accessibility. There's loads and loads and loads you can do to make your app more accessible, and it all depends also on what kind of content you show on your site. We don't really have a text-heavy to-do application. It's not like we're writing a blog here. It's not like we have any audio or video that we need to write subs for or anything like that. So it's mainly some of the navigation on our site that is a bit problematic for people with different kinds of impairments. I would say it's a bit visual impairment, but also just navigating the site. If you don't have a mouse, for example, if you're going to be clicking things, then chances are you're going to be using the keyboard or some other sort of device. I'm definitely no expert by any means, but we can definitely take some small steps at least in the right direction to make our app more accessible. And one of the added benefits of making our app more accessible is that we make it more search engine friendly, so we can achieve some better scores, perhaps rank above another page when it comes to Google and other search engines. So if you are interested in that, then that's an added bonus of making your page more accessible. And of course, it's always good to learn best practices and apply them whenever possible simply. And one of those is accessibility. So we're going to take a little bit of a surface look. I'm definitely no expert, and you can really go very deep into accessibility. So let's start out, I guess. I'm going to start with the Googling a little bit so that you can read a bit about the subject. So I'm just Googling for web accessibility, and one of the pages that I love to look at is MDN, the Mozilla Web Docs. They are really amazing, and I feel like they're kind of factual. They get to the point. There are some really good examples. I just like Mozilla in general. I like their open approach to things. So I think we're going to be looking a bit at HTML, and the main part of this accessibility stuff is to use, semantic HTML. Use the tags for their intended purpose. So if I have a divider, it's mainly for containing other elements, and I should probably not be using a divider for a button. And that is something that I admit to being pretty awful at, just not using the right elements for the right job, so to speak. If I have a clickable content, then most likely I want to use a button. And one of the amazing things now is that we're using Tailwind CSS. So all of the styling is really reset for all of the tags already. So we can simply start off fresh. If we have a button, if I just add a button to app.svelte here, something like a test button, then we can see that there's absolutely no styling whatsoever, but we get some really nice cursor pointer here that we have been adding in multiple places. So it's kind of a good indicator. If I've been adding cursor pointer, then most likely it should just be a button instead. And I've just been very scared of this button element just simply because I don't think that the default one looks good. I feel like it looks really bad. All of the default HTML looks pretty bad in my opinion, but now we have the benefit of using Tailwind CSS. We can just add a button and style it however we like. So we can have buttons instead of using, dividers or spans or whatever else I've been using everywhere. And of course we have been using buttons in some places, so not too much work, I believe, to refactor that. So the main part is here to just use the semantic HTML, just like right here. Instead of having a divider, instead of having a button here, they're using a divider, and that's not good. We want to be using a button because a button is for clickable content. And since we're using the button, we get this stuff automatically. We don't need to worry about the keyboard stuff. We don't need to add our own event listeners to handle keyboard events on it. We only just need to put a button, and simply it is handled by the web browser itself. So we don't have to worry about so many things when we're using the elements for their intended purpose. So I guess we're going to start off by searching for cursor pointers. So chances are all of these places can probably just be replaced by a button. We can just use a button here. We have a divider for this context menu item that we added in the previous video, by the way. So it's only very recently that I learned about this, you can definitely tell. Let's switch it out for a button then. So we have this button, we make it a button instead. Now we can simply remove cursor pointer. We don't need that awful class anymore. If it's gonna be clickable, we just make a button. We can see one side effect though, and that is that buttons have text align center on them, but we can simply handle that now. So for all buttons, we can simply put now that for every button, we want to have text align left, and boom, the problem is solved. So we just put this in our global CSS in app.css, and that is applied to all buttons in the whole project. So now we can just have this nice button. We don't have that big fat yellow warning lingering around anymore. We can just have a button and all of our problems are solved. So let's search for that even further. Now we have this span here, and this is a delete button here. We can just make this a button instead. And since we have the added benefit now of using Vite, we can see immediately with looking, focusing our eye on that and just removing this, making it a button, and boom, when I press Control Save now, boom, absolutely nothing happens. So now we can see that there weren't really any side effects, and that is always good. We can also check for mobile. I doubt that there's any real difference when it comes to the mobile. No, it just looks right. So we can also see that. Does this look how I intend for it to look? Yeah, it does, so no worry there. And we can continue on here with the subtask, and this is the subtask delete button, I believe, and this is this button here, and we can handle that as well. We can just make it a button instead and remove that class. Boom, on click, and absolutely nothing happened. Amazing. We can move on to the tag, and we can make this a button as well, of course. Just make it button, button, button. We love the button. And boom. Let's see, I believe it's this times circle. Yeah, so this is this delete button here, and that worked out. No problems at all. So we also get the added bonus now that we can tab these buttons, and that is really amazing for accessibility. So you can see now that we can see by using the tab button on my keyboard, I can now tab them, which I wouldn't be able to do if I were using like a divider or span or something like that. So now we have a button that we can tab as well. Isn't that amazing? So we have the tags. This is for adding a tag, and let's make this a button, of course. Boom, get rid of that cursor pointer, and absolutely nothing happened. Board list, make this a button. Boom, there we go. Now we have the board list item, and this is also a divider. So this is actually that button here. So why not make it a button, since it is meant to be clicked on. So let's make that a button, and boom, amazing. Now we got that side effect though, that this is now no longer a HTML div element, it's just a HTML button element. That was a quick fix. There we go. And then we have the edit task modal as well that we want to make a button. That was that deadline add button, and that worked out without any issue. And now we're done with cursor pointer. So it's the only next step now is to check for on click. So anything that we made clickable as well, that we intend to be clicked on, should probably just be a button. And of course there are some exceptions like this Svelte body, and that we added for this context menu. So if I click somewhere else on the page, that it will remove the context menu, and that is simply every single where. And we definitely cannot make that a button, so we're not going to be putting a big fat button as the body of our page. But perhaps something we could look at is adding a key down event listener. I'm not really sure how these screen reader and other, accessibility software works. If I am like clicking on this, if I have a context menu, how do I actually unclick that? I really don't know here. So if you have a better idea than me, feel free to comment, but perhaps we can do something like adding a key down at least, so we can try to do something. So if the software that they are using has like key down, if I key down on the body, then I can just remove it anyway. So if I do something like on body key down, and then we can handle this. So we just want to do on key down and on body key down. Boom, and then we get that keyboard event that we can put with that we can annotate here with TypeScript keyboard event. So I believe we can just use if e.key isn't enter, we just return early here. We check that if they enter on the page, we're setting that as our cancel action. If they like enter on the page, then we see that as they want to get rid of that context menu. So then we can simply just call on body click. So we interpret that key down as a click, which is what kind of the button does as well. So just do on body click, and we can't really test this because we can't really press a key on the body of the page, but I believe this is at least somewhat in the right direction. So feel free to comment here if you know the more appropriate way to do this. But you know, we also have another opportunity here. So we have this content editable that we can click and focus on that element here anyways, if we want to edit or rename it. So we don't really need to use the context menus if we are impaired and we don't want to do that. So we have added another option anyways to rename and delete, so I don't feel like we need to worry about it that much. So let's continue looking here if there is anything with on click that isn't a button now, and that shouldn't. You know, we also have the components, of course, but they are just, you know, forwarding the raw click event from a button, presumably. So we don't need to worry about that. That shouldn't be turned into a button magically. So we have that to-do board, button on click. We have this to-do items.svelte component that we haven't been touching forever. This was the old vertical layout that we have like a long time ago, and then we were like doing some mock-up here for the board layout, this amazing board layout that we have now. So we shouldn't probably just not keep this around anymore. I haven't looked at this, there's not really anything that I can learn from it, so we can just remove it, just delete it, get rid of it. You know, it's just cluttering up, giving us warnings. We don't want that. So now we got rid of that. Amazing. We can continue searching then for buttons on click. And this was just a component on click, on click, on click. There we go. We have a modal background. I'm not really sure what we're going to be doing with this though. It's almost the same case here as the body. You know, we have this modal, and I feel like, does it really matter that much if you can't click the background if you know have an accessible layout? We already have a close button that is saying close on it, so I feel like that it makes more sense to just use the close button. But I guess we can add a key down here as well. We can just check if you enter on the background or something. We can see now we're gonna get those warnings, so we can just do on key down, and then we can just handle that as well, I guess. So on background key down, and that will be a keyboard event. E.key is not enter, then we return early here, and then we can just simply call close. And let's put that on background key down there, and then we have on click stop propagation. So we're just stopping the propagation. If we didn't have that stop propagation, if I were to click somewhere here, then since this divider is part of this parent divider, that click event would be propagated to the parent element. But we don't want that. We only want it to handle on click on itself. So if I click somewhere on click here, boom, then it should close. So we simply can do the same here. We already have that key handler event, so we can just do on key down, and then we use the event modifier to make it stop propagation. So we're just stopping the propagation, and there the problem is solved. Amazing. It doesn't look like we have any other elements that need to be changed really. Another thing that I've been thinking about is the actual inputs that we have. We have a lot of inputs in our application. Well, not a lot, but we have some inputs, just like this text area here and this add subtask. And I think the actual best practice here is to use a label rather than using a placeholder. So it's actually, I think it's actually considered quite bad practice to only have a placeholder here. I feel like it looks nicest, it has the most, you know, modern look to it, but I feel like for accessibility it would make more sense here to have like a label that says description, and then we can write the description. You know, kind of the problem with this is that whenever I start typing here, the placeholder disappears, so it could be a bit difficult for some people to know what they are writing here, and especially if there is already filled in text here, then you don't really know what there is underneath there. So this is for the description. We can just simply add a label for that. I'm not really sure about this add subtask though. I'm not sure how good that would look, but we can try it out, I guess. So we simply just want to add a label for this text area. So there's actually something built in for this already that is called a label. So we can do something like description here, and then we can do for here. And I believe that this corresponds to the name that we give it. So this is mainly for forms, but we kind of have a form, but it's just a magic modern form with Svelte and stuff, and old server form. So we have like description here. We can make this, and that does not look good since we have that margin top here. We can add that to the label itself, or we can just make a divider around the whole thing. I think that is better practice, so let's do that, and then we can put margin top 4 there. There we go. And I feel like it would also be nice for labels here to be a bit bold here, so that they can stand out a bit more. So we can do something like label, and then we can do font weight bold, and hopefully that should work, and yes it will. Let's see if I can make it a bit larger as well. So if I do something like apply, we're using Tailwind CSS, we can also have font bold, I believe, if we wanted to use that. But yeah, I feel like that looks all right. Maybe medium instead. Okay, maybe medium does not exist. I think there's like text base, and let's see if there's anything small, extra small. If I make it text large, yeah, I feel like text large looks pretty nice, definitely. So that looks much better. And then for the description, we don't want spell checking on that either, so we can just remove that. No need to spell check. We don't need to be a grammar police here. If they want to have their NJKKK as das description, then they should feel free to do so. So nice, we have description here, and that looks pretty nice actually. But for this add subtask, I'm not really sure how good that would look, but I guess we can try it out. There's no hurt in trying, so we can add a label for that as well. Add subtask or something, subtask name or something like that, and then we can give that name, subtask name. And there's also the margin top here that we want to handle, make it a divider, and boom. I mean, it doesn't look that bad in my opinion. It just looks a bit strange. It looks more modern here to just put it directly underneath, but it's kind of a balancing act how good you want your design to be and how accessible you want your site to be. So most of these modern designs that we have been accustomed to or so aren't that accessible. So if you want to know why your government website looks so bad, it's probably because it should be accessible to all people. So it all kind of depends on what kind of audience you have for your application, or what kind of people you expect to use your application. And if it's just for your own personal use, then maybe you don't need to add all of these accessibility features. But if you're going to be if you intend to release this, or trying to make a business out of it, then of course we want it to be accessible to as many people as possible, of course, but also to a certain level. We can still have some good design. So it's kind of up to you here if you want to have a lot of labels for every single input, or if you want to hide them a bit more in the placeholders, I feel like. And then we also have the create a new task input here that we can take a look at. I'm not really sure if we should make this like a label as well. Let's try it out at least. So create a task. Does that look good now is the question. In my opinion, this is one of the cases where I don't want to be using one. I feel like this looks really bad. I kind of like just having that input box and not really giving that big of a description to what it is. But I guess the screen reader can read the placeholder field as well. At least I hope so. Or perhaps there are things like ARIA labels, I believe, that we can be using as well. I'm not really sure. Defines a string value that labels the current element. So I think we can use this to kind of give the screen reader a bit of a better idea of what is going on here. So I guess we can give it like write a task name and press enter to create a new task. I feel like that is kind of a nice description, just telling the screen reader that this is where you write the task name and then you press enter to create that task. So with like adding these fancy enter presses, it's also kind of bad. We should probably have like a button here for actually creating that task, but we have this nice modern approach that isn't accessible. So just like I said, depends on how nice of a design you want to have. And these ARIA labels, I believe you can add them to about any element at all if you want to be more clear what it does. So I guess we can try it out for this stuff like here as well. And this is also super inaccessible, I would say. It's really it looks really cool, you know, popping up an input field and you can start typing immediately, but it's definitely not accessible by any means. So maybe in the future we could write some kind of accessible mode to our application and show like different layouts that have more buttons and, you know, standard traditional semantic HTML elements that we use to actually help out people who have, you know, accessibility needs. So I feel like we could definitely look a bit at that as well, to make different layouts and add like proper buttons, proper labels every single where. You know, sacrificing a bit of the design, but for a more accessible layout. And one of the other things that I wanted to focus a bit on in this video is also taking a look at the design of our application. I feel like it doesn't look as amazing as I would have hoped for it to look. So I feel like mixturing a bit with the color scheme in this video as well. I'm growing a bit tired of this blue vibe that we have here. I feel like maybe black and white could look even better, so why not try it out, you know, mixture a bit and get our hands dirty when it comes to the design, because currently I feel like it looks a bit dull or not as good as I want it to look. And the modern approach is just to have like black and white anyways, since, you know, we have the best contrast there, so it's also easier to read. We have this kind of button here that could be like an accessibility concern as well when it comes to colors, that it could be quite difficult to read this now, since blue is quite light and this text is white, so bit of a contrast problem there perhaps. For the page layout, perhaps we can try making this more like white again. If I just make this white, how will it look? Absolutely nothing changed. Okay, that was a bit strange. We have a body. Is it that where we are applying it? No, it's actually in here, BG Blue 100. Okay, that's a bit strange. Let's see, is there anywhere else that we are applying that? Nope, so it kind of just broke. I'm not really sure what that was about. Let's reload here, and there we go. Now it's white again. Alrighty, so now what I wanted to try is just making this a bit more grayish or something. How would that look? Would it look better than blue is what I'm trying to see here. So I think it's in sidebar. Yeah, we have the sidebar here. If I make this BG gray like 100, how will that look? Okay, you can barely see it. Oh, it's supposed to be gray with an A. So BG gray, okay, I'm not really sure, does that even look that much better? If I make this 200, how does that look? I kind of prefer the blue layout to this layout, I'm not really sure. If I make this like super blue, how does that look? If I make it like dark blue, okay, that looks really bad. But if I make it like really dark blue, then I make the text white here and the buttons more white as well, so the board list, yes, that's where we have it, yep. So that I can make this text white instead. I guess we want to add that to the whole container there, so my boards. I feel like this looks quite interesting, definitely nicer actually. Maybe I want to make this board list item a bit darker there. I'm not really sure, I'm not a color expert by any means. If I make this color, okay, that was not good. So what I was intending here is actually making it even darker blue, but maybe that doesn't look that good. So if I go back to sidebar here, we have, if I make this like BG Blue 800, how will that look? Okay, it does not look as good as I thought it would look. I guess I can just make this like much lighter then. So we have the board list item. We want to make this like BG Blue 500, just like we had it before, or maybe like a bit darker perhaps. 700, no, that doesn't look good. 600 looks alright, and the BG Blue 400, maybe we can make this BG Blue 500. Okay, that looks really strange. So we want it to be the opposite way around. I feel like it should be lighter whenever it's selected. So if I do something like that, now we have it more like that. And I feel like that looks quite good. You know? If we compare it to the old design, I feel like this looks pretty nice. maybe then the actual background here, we can make this a bit more gray or something. If I make this like BG gray 50, how will that look? Will that look good? You know, it will look nicer than when we have the task cards. They will stand out a bit more. So, you know, it's completely subjective. I'm just trying out with colors. I just recommend that you know, try looking at different ways to improve the design of your site if you're not completely happy with it already. Just like I wasn't completely happy with that blue design. You know, if you really don't like it, if you have like an itch and feel like, oh, we can make this better, then spend some time doing that, because it will really help you gain some sanity. At least myself personally, if it doesn't look good, I get a bit frustrated because I want it to look good. So I feel like we can also then add some ARIA labels to these things, like my boards. We can make for this button here, this icon button here, we can do something like ARIA label, and this is going to be add a new board. We're just giving some descriptive labels here and telling the screen reader then that for this button, if you click on this button, then you're gonna be adding a new board. And yeah, that looks pretty nice. And also then clicking on a board list item, I guess we can handle that as well. So if I add like an ARIA label, switch, maybe we can add some dynamic svelte here, why not? So switch to, and then we want this to be board.name board. So this will be like switch to another board or switch to default board. I guess we can remove the board. So switch to another board, since we're given those names. Pretty good. And then we have this edit and delete on the to-do item itself. So that's to-do item actions as well. We want to add this here, so we can add ARIA label, and this will be delete task, and then ARIA label here will be edit task. And yeah, that looks pretty nice. I feel like that's quite descriptive of what it does. And yeah, that's quite nice. And then the edit task model, again, we can add to these buttons here. I feel like they're pretty unclear anyways, even if we haven't labeled them, or even if we can see them perfectly. They are quite hard to understand what they do. So not really sure what we're gonna be doing there. I feel like we could perhaps increase the font size a little bit, since, you know, they're quite small in general. So if I make it like text large instead, how will that look? Yeah, I guess it improved it a little bit. Do the same for this button here. Yeah, I feel like it looks a bit better, but still, you know, we can definitely take a look at this in a future episode if we can come up with a more clever way to show this, that we're gonna be adding something. But let's add some ARIA labels. Why not do that? So let's have an ARIA label for this, and this will be add a new tag. Then for the deadline as well, we want to add that. So this will be ARIA label, and then we can have add a deadline. Yeah, I guess we can search for all the buttons, really. Anything that you can click on could be nice to give a description to. So we have this button here, and this is what, you know, it's actually toggle sidebar. So once to give that label there. Then we have context menu item. I guess we can, yeah, we don't really need to add an ARIA label. You know, it kind of says itself by the name here. So clear what it does anyways. Sidebar context menu button. One thing that we haven't actually done here is for these, you know, button components, we're not really adding ARIA labels, so maybe we can do something about that. I'm not really sure if we can expose this as a prop. Let's try it out. So if I do something like export let ARIA label string, you definitely not have dashes here in the variable name here. So I'm not really sure about that. I think there's actually something built in Svelte that you could use to get the actual props like more dynamically. So let's search for that. So Svelte props, let's see if I can get that. I think it's something like this, declaring props. Let's see if I can use this here. So yeah, we get some stuff here from the props. Let's just try logging out the props here. So we can add an ARIA label, then use this props object here to get it dynamically. So I'm not really sure how well this will work, since it will probably just be undefined now if it hasn't been added by the parent component, but the null coalescing operator. So if it is null or undefined, then it will simply just be an empty string instead. So let's try that out now. If I add it for this edit task button, so edit task modal, we can add something like ARIA label, and then we can do close modal. Let's see if that works then. So if I open this modal and inspect that element, do I get that ARIA label? And yes, I do. I get this ARIA label close modal. But the problem now is that every single button now has that. So we have this task file IO. We can see it should probably just be an empty string then. And I'm not really sure how good practice that is, because maybe it kind of expects it to be simply non-existent if you don't intend to have anything like read by the screen reader. So not really sure if we can do something in Svelte to only apply this if it has. Maybe I can set it to undefined. I'm not sure if that will work. Let's see now. If I select this button, oh, it actually seems like it worked then. So now it will be undefined, and then it will simply not be added to the element here, it seems like. I'm not really sure. Feel free to comment if you know more about this, but we can now see that for these elements that I add an ARIA label to, then I simply can have an ARIA label on, and that is quite awesome. So now I can just add ARIA labels to the buttons that I choose to have ARIA labels on. But I feel like most of these buttons are pretty self-explanatory, you know, they have the actual action written on them already, so I don't feel like we really need to give them that many ARIA labels, but it's just a nice possibility to be able to add ARIA labels if we want to in the future, so if there's any unclear buttons. But for the most part, we just simply want to put the action here and make it as straightforward and easy and clear language as possible. But I feel like that is quite nice. We've added some fundamental accessibility. We can definitely go much deeper and make it even more accessible, but it's at least good to be a bit more aware about it and think about it. If we're gonna be making something clickable, we most likely just want to use a button, so we need just apply this mindset a bit more and think about it a bit more when designing our layout, so that we don't need to do it later, and just like in this video where we have been putting it off for way too long, so we can simply avoid doing these mistakes when they appear. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Feel free to comment what you thought about it, or if you have any suggestions on what to improve, or any comments in general. But other than that, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.